All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started, and I am going to make sure I can let anybody in. Here we go. Got a few more people.
You guys, I don't drink coffee, but I feel compelled, so I have a cup of hazelnut coffee.
I've got mine too. I think I'm the only. Oh, good. Tracy's got something.
Mine is also tea.
Oh, hey, Mary.
All right, we're
glad to have you.
Yeah. We're going to go ahead and get started. This morning we are talking about the hot topic of virtual co-teaching. So I'm very excited that you all are here. To dig in, we've gotten a lot of questions over the last few weeks of what does this look like? And, how can we get beyond being two teachers in a Zoom room? So we're going to talk about that this morning. So we're glad that you're here. For those of you who don't know, we're the Diverse Learners Cooperative, and we're a nonprofit organization with a mission of connecting teachers and leaders to the professional learning networks and resources they need to further best practice for diverse learners, and with an ultimate goal of keeping teachers in the classroom so that we can have more experienced teachers serving our diverse learners. So, good morning. Today we are going to identify strategies we can use to maximize the effectiveness of our co-teaching time with our diverse learners. And we'll start with the why, we'll dig into a problem of practice, and we'll look at 6 co-teaching power moves this morning. So Mary, my co-teacher, is going to kick us off.
Yeah, the first thing we want to think about when we're talking about co-teaching is what's our vision for it. And so we envision a reframing of what co-teaching looks like in the virtual world. So we see teachers pushing past compliance to build a more impactful view of co-teaching that increases student engagement and achievement. So today we're going to talk about a few ways that we can work towards that vision. Our problem of practice that we hear all the time is this. This is almost a direct quote from a teacher. I am co-teaching in several classes throughout the day, but most of the time I'm simply virtually present but silent until I meet with students on my caseload at the end of the lesson. What can I do to make this better? But today, we're going to dig into just a few ways that we can address this problem.
Great. So we're going to talk about a few co-teaching power moves. Here we go.
Go ahead. Our first one is that we have to intentionally plan our moves. So we need to think about specifically what each teacher is going to be doing during the lesson and pick specific strategies that are going to move the lesson forward without overwhelming the students. Sometimes co-teaching can be, we can overplan or overdo it. And so we're thinking about what are the specific things that are going to move the lesson forward and add to what the students are learning. So just a few examples. If teacher A is lecturing, teacher B can be modeling note-taking on a document camera. Or if teacher A is delivering an interactive lesson where students have a response that they have to give, like a thumbs up or a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the other teacher should be making notes about the student participation, student involvement, what their responses are, collecting that data. If the first teacher is facilitating oral checks for understanding, then teacher B can be in the chat, sending sentence frames for students to use, giving them ideas on how to start that so that they're not hung up on the language. That teacher can be choosing which students to call on for response. Or if a teacher is reading aloud a book, then the other teacher can be modeling a thinking map on a whiteboard or an app. And you can do that by sharing your screen simultaneously. The next thing we also want to think about, our next power move, is considering parity. When we're thinking about 2 teachers in a classroom, we want it to feel for those students like those teachers are both of their teachers, that they run that classroom together, and that it's a joint, co means together. And so it's a joint classroom that they're working through together. So there's some little ways to do that, to send that message to students and to the teachers themselves. So we want for both teachers to interact with the families of all students. This takes some stress and pressure off of one teacher. It helps carry the load of that, but it also sends the message to families that they're working together, that their child's education is valuable to them, that more than just one person is paying attention to what they're doing and they're invested in their kid. Little things you can do are like pin both of your videos on the screen. So when students are watching the lesson, you have 2 videos of the speakers side by side. So they're always seeing both teachers at the forefront. We want for all the teachers in the classroom to refer to all the students as our students, often in special education or English learners. And I have to catch myself sometimes. You refer to your students as my students, but they're all of our students. All of the students in the classroom are the ones that we're serving. We also want teachers to have a say in the lesson planning and the structure. That's something that they do together. Both teachers should be meeting with students in small groups. Both teachers should be delivering the lesson material and planning for a variety of access points to learning. So both teachers should be scaffolding that instruction. And also, both teachers should be keeping students accountable for learning by getting student feedback and giving student feedback.
Great. Another strategy that we can use is to flex our grouping models. And when we think about grouping, we can consider a few different things. One is who's in the group. And we need to mix this up. So it could be a homogeneous group, meaning we group by need, or we group by a particular interest or data set, or we could look at heterogeneous groups. So we mix up the groups by levels, by data, by interest, by type of student. And so using different kinds of grouping strategies is really going to get the most out of different learning objectives. Let your objective drive your decisions here. We can also consider with whom they're meeting. So are they meeting with which teacher? Are they meeting independently? We can consider the size of the groups. They don't always have to be equal groups. We could have a small group. We could have a 1/3 and 2/3 group. It really depends on what your students need and how you can best meet those needs. They could work in partners. You could do independent group time, and then provide access to differentiated supports within those groups. So we may group them by the support that they need to accomplish that task, and that support could be given within those small groups. And finally, make sure to integrate social interaction between peers within your groups. This is really important when we talk about heterogeneous groups, right? We want students to be able to interact across their whole class in different ways at different times. Another quick tip to think about, and you can work together with your co-teacher to actually implement this tip, is that every 3 minutes, can you have your students engage in some way? Whether they're typing something, writing something, clicking on something, or talking about something. And if you can do that every 3 minutes, you're going to run a really engaging synchronous time. You can also think about this in asynchronous time, right? Like, so how often are they engaging with the material that you're giving them? When we are thinking about co-teaching, often we get stuck into we have this 60 minutes to co-teach, or this 30 minutes, or whatever that looks like for you, depending on your class. And especially in this virtual environment, we have the opportunity to think beyond that clock. Co-teaching is happening in multiple forms and multiple ways when you are working together to further your students' learning. And so here are some ways to think about co-teaching outside of that 60-minute block. First of all, you can pre-teach. Think about ways that you can preview the agenda or the objectives with students. Sometimes if students just know where the lesson is headed, they're able to engage further into that lesson. You can preview essential vocabulary. You can teach a prerequisite skill. You can get started with a set of materials. Sometimes students just need to know, I need a pencil and a piece of paper right here, right now, or I need to open these tabs or these applications in order to be ready for the class. Or you can go ahead and get the paper set up, or you can get started on the assignment so that students have a head start into the content of the lesson. You can think about post-teaching. So of course, after the lesson, you could provide additional guided practice or extend their independent practice. You can reteach a skill, or maybe you might pull a juicy sentence if you're familiar with that protocol, but really pull a really meaningful sentence from the text that you are going to dive deeper into to highlight the key concepts from that lesson. If we think about outside of the before and after lesson, we could also provide an additional check-in for a student or small group of students. This could be focused on not the lesson content, but really on checking in with that student as an emotional check-in. And we could problem solve something or go through a writing conference with that student outside of the lesson, or provide office hours, and that could be one teacher or the other, or it could be both teachers at the same time, just ready to answer student questions. And then the final way that I would think about this is an asynchronous modes. So can we provide student feedback? Can we record lessons together, provide scaffolds, choices, and accommodations? And when I think about all of these ways to think beyond the clock, I'm thinking about either teacher or both teachers. And really either teacher can provide differentiated support. And sometimes that's going to require both of us to do it at the same time.
And our last piece of Power Moves, our fifth one, is to prioritize co-planning. This is true virtually and in real life, but there's a few tips that we have, and we're linking. This is a screenshot on the right of a planning agenda that you could potentially use for doing this. But one thing to keep in mind is that this is new for both of you. So this is new teaching for everybody right now. What we're doing, we've never really done before. And so come into the meetings with that mindset that both of us are trying things, we're both figuring it out, we're working together to make this better for our students. You want to schedule a regular time that works for both of you and keep it consistent so that you're not having to reschedule it every week. You just don't need to think about it. You just need to show up and do it. You want to leverage your individual strengths for planning and for delivery. So one of you may be more skilled at charting in the moment, just what students are saying, making thinking maps, and you want to consider that when you're planning. Identify the shared responsibilities and then intentionally divide the rest of the responsibilities. So look at the big things and then also think about that A and B chart. What is the other teacher going to be doing while one teacher is doing their thing? You also want to create a way to track and review student data together and then support parent participation in the co-planning process.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think right now, parents are such a key part of our co-teaching. It's almost like a triad, right? Like they're helping support in person with that student and with that group of students across. So how do we engage parents in that process as co-teachers in a way, or co-planners, depending on how you think about that?
Absolutely.
So we have several resources that want to point you to. One is that co-planning protocol, the screenshot that was on the slide before, that we put together both an agenda and some norm setting tools that you can use within that document. And then also a rundown of co-teaching models. So sometimes people get stuck into the model language of co-teaching. Models are great and we use them often. The thing is, we should use them fluidly, both across lessons. You know, every lesson is not going to call for the same model, and within lessons, you can filter in, like flow in and out of team teaching into parallel teaching, alternative teaching, whatever you need to get your objective to the students in the way that the students need it. And so, but this handout does break down some strategies that you can use across the models within both synchronous and asynchronous settings. We linked a couple of resources here that we found helpful when thinking about virtual co-teaching. And if you want more resources on accessible instruction, there's a ton at the dlcresourcecenter.com, and we'd encourage you to check that out. And a final reminder that we are all in this together. There is a lot of grace to be given to each other as co-teachers, as coaches, as school leaders, and all of the roles that we are playing. Grace to our parents, grace to our students, as we are learning this together. And we can move learning forward in the ways that we can in this current season and moment. So to recognize that this is a season of togetherness, even when we cannot be together. With that said, we are excited. Next week, we're doing a coffee chat on task boxes for remote learning, and thinking about what could be useful there to drive learning forward as well. But at this time, we'll take any questions you have about co-teaching or observations or small wins you've had with co-teaching at your schools.